afternoon, everyone. My name is Florian Koenigsberger. I am, among other things, a photographer, a technologist, a deep believer in the power of images, as I think is true for all of us here, and a very proud student and acolyte of the Vision and Justice movement. In 2019, almost 6 years ago today, I sat at the edge of my seat in the auditorium at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard, in tears, overcome, to borrow Sherrilyn's word, by what I had just seen and the burning question, how do I honor what I just experienced? And today, 6 years later, I'm here to share the story of building and leading what we went on to call our Image Equity Initiative at Google, of building a technology that fights the racial bias baked into smartphone cameras, born from the scholarship and community of this group. And as we all ponder what to do with the magic of this convening in 2025, I hope that this story plants perhaps another seed of possibility to meet the moment that we face now. I want to rewind to a series of what ended up being very cathartic moments starting in 2017. I had just come back from living in Brazil, and I remember getting a notification on my phone, it was an iPhone, to revisit memories of my mother. And when I opened that, this is what I saw. My mother is in a lot of these. There she is next to Miss Tina, but she's not the ones in the red boxes. She is certainly not that woman that I photographed at Afropunk several years ago. She is certainly not my male black high school classmates, and she is definitely not the young men that some of you may recognize from photographers that were taken in countries that my mother has never been to. And so it opened a crack for me that suggested that maybe this great modern innovation of our time doesn't actually know everything. A second and more consequential discovery was stumbling into an auditorium where Sarah Lewis and Michael Famighetti, in good company, were discussing the recently released Vision and Justice issue of Aperture. And for me, this was the beginning of mending a gaping hole that I didn't realize existed in my photographic education. I wasn't aware of the contributions of my community to the mediums of photography and film. And this issue exposed that. It interrogated it rigorously. And finally, I had been at Google for a number of years at that point, and I remember hearing these whispers that our Pixel camera team, which is our smartphone, I see at least one or two in the room, represent, that they might be working with Annie Leibovitz on a technical partnership. And for anybody who's worked in the tech industry, you know that the egos of some of these engineers are not exactly compatible with inviting in an expert from the outside. And so I wondered if there wasn't a bigger possibility there. If all of that is the tinder flying around in the air, the necessary spark came in the form of direct encouragement from Sarah. I dug this up in preparing. I think this is one of our earliest meetings on the project. You asked me, what can only you do at this company for your community? That question was the starting gun of the race that went on to define my purpose and career at Google. I dove in deep. I spent almost a year chasing down, we have this internal platform where you can look anyone at the company up, anybody and everybody who had computational photography in their job description. At first, I'm sure much to my colleagues' chagrin, I was a bit of a Jehovah's Witness. Hello, sir. Do you have time for the good news about Frederick Douglass? I shared what I had learned, that he was the most photographed American man of the 19th century. Nobody believed that. That he understood, as we've heard so many times in this convening, that images could tell us who counted and who mattered, and that they would do more for our progress as African Americans than policy or war ever could. Our code name was born, Project Douglass. I echoed the words of one of my favorite college professors, Laura Wexler, who said to us that photography makes the world appear the way the world appears to be. And I said to my colleagues, if that's true, aren't we the ones who make the world appear the way it appears to be in a world where we increasingly receive each other through screens and images taken on these phones, our most democratic tool since Kodak came around with the Brownie camera? And if we want to call ourselves innovators, which God knows that industry loves to do. Didn't we have a moral duty to confront this historical racial bias? Here again, culture gave credence to my cause. Sarah's New York Times article explained Kodak's 1950s Shirley cards and how they supported the development of film emulsion technology to prefer lighter skin tones, right? Omitting darker skin tones in their testing process. Importantly, identifying that film emulsion technology is a technology and not something that just works the way it does because it does. Dr. Joy Boland-Winnie and her urgent work articulating the risk of letting algorithmic bias go unchallenged. I took those articles into the room with my leadership and said, this is why this is urgent. And it led us to a question. What would it take to build the world's most inclusive camera? And that question became a mission. As an aside, quite prophetically, I was on a flight back from India to Munich on a research project about racism in India and the caste system as it relates to skin tone. And I had put off watching When They See Us until I was flying and by myself because I knew it was going to run me over like a freight train. And it did. And between the second and the third installments, I went to use the bathroom, and I opened my phone, and I had gotten the email from my technical lead that they had decided to sign on to the project. We just do this, I guess. This was the mission statement that we adopted for our initiative, focusing on building technology that was not only best in class, right, spanning a wide variety of imagery tools, but also focusing very specifically on the existing gap for people of color, especially those with darker skin tones in the medium. And this became the spark for what went on to become a 6-year mission that continues today across multiple product areas spanning hundreds of employees. And Realtone, this technology that now sits in every iteration of the Pixel since Pixel 6, is the baby of that mission. Our work became to change this camera to see us the way we want and ought to be seen. So a little bit about this journey, because it did not happen overnight. The first most urgent thing was to fill the hole that we had in our teams around aesthetic expertise, right? We had a ton of computational expertise. We did not know what our North Star was. And so we brought in this incredible panel over the years of external, what we called our image experts, photographers, cinematographers, colorists, directors. And we said to them a thing that I thought I would never hear out of my colleagues' mouths, which was, we don't know what the answer is. And we've talked so much about the artists knowing before, right, the rest of us do, and I think this was a perfect example of that. Their feedback became the building blocks of this technology. We gave them our unreleased devices. They went back into their communities. They took tons of pictures and images, and they came back and they told us, very frankly, what wasn't working. I remember those meetings having to tell them, this is not going to be one of those corporate things where y'all have to figure out the feedback sandwich. You really need to tell us what doesn't work, and you need to tell us in your terms why it doesn't work. This set a completely new precedent for the way that our teams worked. I cannot think of another example where artists were able to sit in with engineering teams like this and tell them why they were wrong, and have those engineers listen, hanging on to every word that they said. They not only gave our teams a technical and cultural education, but they changed their lives. They changed their internal compass about why their work mattered. I will never forget the senior engineer who came to me one day and said, I just want you to know that I went to my boss, I want to quit, and I'm ready to leave this company. But I told them that they have to keep me on half-time so that I can keep working on this project, because I understand that this is the most important thing I can be doing with my time here. I witnessed so many beautiful conversations over these years about what it means to be seen on our own terms, with our own tools, and some disastrous ones. This started in the pandemic. We're on a large video call. Dion Ivory, beautiful, beautiful black woman, image maker and director, is on the call, and she keeps telling our engineers that our camera is making her subjects look ashy. And I remember the virtual hand going up, and he says, I'm sorry, I have to ask you, you keep using a word that starts with A that I'm not familiar with. And I froze and thought, this is where it all comes apart. I asked for their trust to come into these rooms, and here's this man saying he's never heard the word ashy. And her response was beautiful, and it set the tone for the rest of the project. She explained what it was, why it was important to her culturally, how it showed up in the images, and he took that so seriously. And to this day, every iteration of the technology since, he's talked about, he's like, I know we're down on ashiness. This is a measurable improvement, right? A man who'd never heard that word in his life before. The work of culture. This 2-year in-depth collaboration led to the 2021 launch of this technology, Realtone, on the Google Pixel 6. And it comprises a set of computational photography improvements, fancy word for all the things that our phones do with software when we're taking a picture, driven by machine learning, the aesthetic feedback I mentioned from our experts, and hundreds of thousands of more diverse images and videos that entered our training data as a result of this partnership to make a more fair and representative camera for our communities. In other words, making us look more like us. Shouldn't be that hard. I want to give you a couple examples of what this looks like. In computational photography, face detection is a huge part of reading an image. We have to understand what faces are in an image to render them. And so we improved our face detection classifier so that even in challenging lighting situations where you have a backlit scene, we're able to identify that there is a face and then compensate accordingly. Our experts also helped our teams gain a more nuanced understanding of the right targets for face brightness, especially with darker skin tones, fighting the built-in biases to automatically brighten darker skin or leave it deeply underexposed. I remember we were in Houston, it was 100 degrees, sitting on the back of a truck when Dion took this picture of Salma. And we showed her the before and after, and she was speechless because she said it was the first time that I understand that I'm not the problem, the technology is. We developed more accurate skin tone renderings through auto white balance improvements. We built a brand new skin tone classifier, which receives the skin tones that are in the picture, codifies them, and then compensates accordingly using the right color balance, right? Think, what's her name, the little bears, right? Not too warm, not too cool, respecting undertones. And all of this, Goldilocks, thank you, yes. Wasn't too popular in my house, clearly. All of this was backed up by a series of blind tests that we ran with hundreds of photographers, image makers of color outside of the company, where we asked them to look at image results for multiple top-tier smartphone cameras as we were improving the technology. And time and again, our investment proved its worth. They were choosing the Pixel images over insert competitor here. This project has been a gift, and it's been transformational. First and foremost, as we talk about the end of DEI, this was the best-selling phone in history to date at the time that we released it. It changed the visual language of one of the largest companies in the world. This is one of the billboards that ran at the time of launch, featuring Bee Walker, a good friend of many in the room, for those who know her. And under the table, it put tens of millions of dollars in the last 6 years in the hands of Black and brown creatives who contributed to making this technology and telling this story. It helped real-life superheroes of mine shine in all of their melanin on the cover of Ebony for Wakanda Forever, that is taken on a Pixel 7. It influenced industry standards. DxOMark is a French company that was celebrated for many years as the standard for scoring a smartphone camera. Every time they released their scores, the big companies would rush to publish what their score was. Directly in response to this project, for the first time, they now have a skin tone performance measurement category to standardize this across the industry, which catalyzes something else, which was always the goal. I stand here today, no longer working at Google, never having really cared whether Google was the best in this category, because the whole point was to turn the industry by using this fulcrum. If you could make people here care, you can be damn sure that Apple and Samsung are going to have to do the work to catch up. And our comparative testing shows that. Every year since, you will never hear it from Apple's mouth in a presentation, because that's not how they work. But we've seen in the image data, every smartphone camera in the market has gotten better on this issue since this project went live, which is extraordinary for me as somebody who is so personally connected to this issue in my family, which I'll get into in a little bit. Off the back of Realtone's success, we were also able to build the Image Equity Fellowship, which awarded $20,000 each to 20 emerging photographers of color across the US, and a dedicated exhibition at Pioneer Works with many beloved friends in the room at Aperture for Freedom's Free the Work. This project won the highest prize in the advertising industry, the Cannes Grand Prix Lion, in 2022 for its technical innovation. And the only reason that that matters to me is because it signals to somebody else in that room who might have been in my position, who had to bang these doors down over the course of 6 years, that this is what winning work looks like. Finally, one that was near and dear to my heart, we got to produce the first ever HBCU All-Star game at the NBA All-Star Weekend, sponsored by Pixel, and Shaniqua Jarvis was the director and photographer of that spot. And I will never forget watching these guys look at the pictures of themselves on the phone for the first time and really feel that their own device could see them the way they wanted to be seen. And most important, right, all this is nice, but I think the most important achievement of the work is that it's been publicized in too many places to go backwards. Even in this time where funding is diminishing, it's still on the website. They can't get rid of it because it has become a defining differentiator of why people want to buy this phone. And as we think about how we make lasting tools, this was a really, really important one to not let go. I come from a mixed race family where the battle for a balanced image is familiar. And as I look at these images made over the years on this phone, my parents, friends when we were down in Nigeria doing research for the project, my wife and 2 of her friends, I come back to what Theastra said yesterday about restoring dignity to places. And in this case, those places are our memories and the people that we love. I often come back to this image of my maternal grandmother, Curleen Harvey. I didn't have a lot of time with her, and it's an unfortunate example of the limitations of a medium that were not developed with her in mind. Realtone has become a tribute to her and so many others' dignity, and also a way for my generation and the experts who came on to support this work to say to the next, as I like to imagine 2 fathers are saying to their 2 sons in this image, I hope the world sees you like I do. I'm so grateful to partake in this intergenerational convening. I really, really look forward to being inspired by each of you in my next chapter. And I'm really excited to hear the brilliance of a friend and hero, Dr. Joy, next. Thank you.